Hey everybody, you are listening to Mental Fitness Matters. I am your host, Tracy Alston, and this is WSIC Radio. Happy Thursday. What a week it has been. There's been so much tragedy and sadness all over the world right now. My heart breaks for the tragic events with George Floyd and the countless others who have lost their lives due to hate and racism. As a country, we have to do better. We have to do better. I believe hate is taught. And so it is my hope that with continued education, awareness, and coming together and using our voices for good, that we can have a positive impact on the nation and really learn to lead with compassion, kindness, and empathy. As a community, I want us to do our part to begin to ask the questions, what can I do? What can we do? We have to begin to lead with compassion. And compassion is caring about another person's happiness as well as if it was your own. Compassion is caring about another person's happiness as if it were your own. Okay, so I'm going to leave that right there, and we're going to get into today's show. I do have an amazing guest with me on for today. We're going to be talking about helping athletes adapt to life after sports, developing professionals beyond the game. I just think this is such a necessary conversation for our current and former athletes. As a former athlete myself and graduate from Wake Forest University, I played basketball there. I just remember that transitioning from college into life, it was almost like a identity crisis. Really, all my life, all I knew was practice, games, travel, practice, on and on and on. That was my life. And so after the ball stopped bouncing, it's like, now what? I had never really thought about having to literally use my brain and my body for something other than sports, right? And so I am so honored to have my guest on with me today. He is such a visionary and such an amazing human being. Junotonio Pinckney. He is the founder of two companies located in Fort Mill, South Carolina, Titanium Ops and Professionals Beyond the Game. Junotonio holds a bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's degree in school counseling and educational leadership from Winthrop University, where he also played college basketball. He also earned his MBA from Wake Forest University. Go Deeks! So my fellow Deek in the studio with me today. As you can see, he's coming to us with a lot of experience and knowledge. From an athletic standpoint and as a professional himself beyond the game, he's more than an athlete. Junotonio, welcome to the studio, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Tracy. How are you?
Doing amazing. So good to have you on, buddy. If you would like, is there anything else that you would like our audience to know about you before we get into the show today?
You know, your kind words have started. I will say that this is something new for me. So this is preparing for this, just being able to speak to an audience and speak with a dynamic speaker like yourself. It's just an awesome experience, and I appreciate the opportunity to do it with you.
Absolutely, buddy. Well, I am so thankful and grateful that you are here. And what I normally do for people who are just tuning in for the very first time, you're listening to the Mental Fitness Matters show. This show is designed to provide you with tips, strategies, and solutions to improve your mental health and mental fitness. And Junotonio, I normally ask all of my guests to just let the audience know, what does mental fitness mean to you? And what do you do right now to keep yourself mentally fit, especially with all that's going on in the world?
Sure. Well, you know, mental fitness for me is just simply having that balance of brain health and emotional health. And that just requires the ability to be able to slow down. Now, it looks different for everybody, so I can only speak for myself. You know, particularly when things like this happen, for this week, I had to call my mother, and I was and just check in and make sure that she was okay. And there's no other voice in my life of reason that allows me to slow down. She always gives me this acronym, right? Stop. It's become a safe word in our house, even with our kids. And it's, stop. The S is, slow down. And then that T is, think. Give your time self to process. Observe what you are doing internally, what you're going around in your environment. Which for me is really important, because when I get stressed, that behavior can manifest itself in negative ways. And I have those unintended consequences of actually taking it out on the ones I care about most, not even realizing it. And then it's prepare to proceed. By slowing down, what's the next step? So it's not reactive. and you aren't doing things again, having those unintended consequences. And so that mental fitness and the ability to stop, slow down, and typically it involves talking to someone. And for this week in particular, I just had to reach out to my mom, make sure she was okay. That fills my love tank,
Yeah.
To know that. And then also, my grandmother said you pray for wisdom and understanding. And so it's helpful for me to talk to someone that's a little bit older, that's lived a little bit, that can give a reassuring voice in the midst of all this turmoil and this angst.
That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing this whole acronym of STOP. I think we can all use that today. That is such a powerful thing. And thank you for sharing that. Let's get into the show. Let's talk a little bit. As a former college athlete yourself, what was it like for you to kind of transition from college ball into professional life? Did you know kind of what your next steps were, what your path was? Tell us how you kind of got to where you are now.
No, I had no idea. I remember graduating, the week. It's crazy. It's almost 20 years to the day.
Yeah.
That I graduated. But we were coming off athletically. I was coming off this athletic high, so to speak. We had just won back-to-back Big South championships. We had gone to the NCAA tournament twice. And even though the performance there wasn't what you would expect, the fact that you even just made the tournament was a blessing and a privilege. And so, when I'm coming, I have this championship brand that I'm just wearing on my chest, walking around, and, I'm graduating. I remember literally riding with one of my best friends, and he was like, "Man, have you been to career service?" I was like, "Nah." "Have you?" "Nah, let's go to the mall." It wasn't even thinking about what's next. We were just living in the moment.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and 20 years later, I was like, man, how hard is it now just to be present and be in the moment? And so, that was the mentality that I left school with. Having hadn't put real thought into what's the next step. I've been coached most of my life, really all of my life, if you include parenting, but athletically, I've been coached. And so there's been such a structure in which I didn't put together myself. It took a team to build this structure, to have, these routines. And now all of a sudden, you got a whiteboard, figure it out,
Yeah.
create it. Like I said, I was blessed to have a strong network, and it was one of those things to where it wasn't that I wanted to go into banking. It was just tapping my network, meeting people, saying, "Hey, this is something that you can do."
Mm-hmm.
So I did it. And that put me on a path of, I hear a lot of speakers talk about, we're human beings, not human doings.
Yeah.
But because I wasn't focused on the being, I did what I knew to do, and I started doing what I was trained to do, and that became my way of life. And it took me down this path to where it was just pulling me, because I felt like I wasn't on the path that was, meant for me, fulfilling my purpose. And it really eats at you slowly over time, because you don't feel that first, because again, I'm on this athletic high, right?
Yeah.
I still have access. I'm still playing ball actively. So that helped. I was able to go and still work out with the team. So my body hadn't started breaking down yet. But as I got further away and sports got further away, it's like that rug gets pulled out from under you. And then one day you wake up and you're like, well, I was like, man, I'm no longer an athlete. That's what I'm telling myself. Right.
Yeah.
And so now I'm having these conversations in my head. So what do I do? And it wasn't until I woke up and said, I gotta actually talk to somebody and connect with someone, that things started to turn around for me in terms of that transition, because I was going to a dark place. Mm-hmm. And even though I was walking in the light and physically I looked fine.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're bringing up some really good points. I read somewhere where they talk about how it's often said that sports stars or athletes die twice. at the time that they retire or when their career ends and then at their actual death. And you talked about that championship high. So think about that, for athletes out there, if you've ever played any type of competitive sports or just had an adrenaline rush in any way, as athletes, you're having high doses of serotonin, which is the feel good chemical pouring into your brain day in and day out. And all of a sudden, that dramatic drop in serotonin or that suddenly stops, that changes your whole neurochemistry. And so I've seen a lot where depression begins to set in because people really have that identity piece of who am I now, right? Because you've identified so long as the athlete or people know you in that way. And then all of a sudden that's gone. And so that realization of having to look in the mirror is like, wait a minute. I remember I used to have dreams that I was late for practice. It took me a couple of years that I was like, oh yeah, I'm not practicing or playing, but I used to dream that I was waking up late for practice, so it takes some time to adjust.
It does. I think I know for me, there was a lot, and it's crazy because I have a master's in counseling, and so so here's what and I coach to this, don't allow the training to replace who you are.
Oof.
Just because you're trained in it, that you actually apply it, because as you talk about that loss, loss is just not in death. There's still stages of grief that many people go through. And I was experiencing that. And whereas here I'm working with folks, I'm counseling, I'm coaching, and I was not putting that same energy and that same investment back into my own mental health and my own well-being. And lo and behold, it took me a while to even realize that I had something that I needed to get to acceptance with.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that lack of self-awareness in that area, because life is complex as it is anyway, now in addition to that, I'm taking on different roles. I'm playing different positions. When we were in school, I mean, it was, I'm block to block,
Yeah.
Cass will tell you, I'm not running around on the wing. I know my play, and it was great. But now, husband, father, professional, it's all these different things that are pulling on you. And this one little thing that you think you have you're in control of, or you've dealt with it or moved past it, for whatever ego, whatever, it's slowly eating at you. And before you know it, you're in this, like you said, you're just in this depressive state. And that's where I was, because I thought I had way more control. And if nothing else, this 2020 has shown, I think, the entire world that we do not have as much control as we think. And we need each other more than we ever could have imagined.
That right there. And I think that is a great place for us to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to get into your vision, professionals beyond the game, because everything you've just touched on, I'm hearing how the journey and your pieces are just all interconnected, and you're doing the work and you're putting together such an amazing program. I can't wait to share this with our audience. You're listening to the Mental Fitness Matters Show. I'm Tracy Alston. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. You are listening to Mental Fitness Matters. I am your host, Tracy Alston, and I'm here with Junotonio Pinckney, founder of Professionals Beyond the Game. And we're talking about helping athletes adapt to life after sports, developing professionals beyond the game. And before we just went to break, we were just kind of talking about some of the mental effects of no longer playing your sport, or the identity change and the emotions and the feelings that can kind of come up with that. And I have a visionary in the studio with me today, and he has this program, Professionals Beyond the Game. Could you tell our audience about Professionals Beyond the Game?
Sure, absolutely. One of the things that I miss most about playing was being in the locker room with my team, and as my professional career progressed, and like I said, now I've been graduated 20 years, you would hear the analogies and the connections. You would see like we're a team and team values, but I was becoming distraught actually, because I hadn't felt like I'd been on a team, and I was just missing that team element. And the things that I was going through were difficult to even express, much less talk about, and when I went on this journey, so to speak, of really pulling back and saying, okay, what is for Junotonio? What is it that I want to be doing with my life? What's my purpose path? And what does success look like in this championship run that I'm trying to make in the game of life, right? And even my thinking about life change. because it was great to play and be on a team and to experience playing in the dance, but at the end of the day, there's one life, there's one game, which is life, and there's one whistle.
Yeah.
And so how do I play this game in a way that when it's all said and done, I felt like I've left a legacy. That's my championship. I've left something for my kids. And so for me, I started going back to my happy spaces and what points in my life that in terms of reflection. And obviously it was college, but professionally, I thought about my time with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. And just, I thought about my time as a counselor first. And even as a counselor, in the high school, I was working with student athletes, and because I was an NCAA coordinator, when I was a recruiter, talent acquisition, Scott Lilly was a point guard, and our team was built around this sports mentality. It was those 2 times I had the most fun ever. It was talent development. It was working with athletes. It was, and by virtue of working with athletes, you tend to extend to the entire community, right? Because when you think about what goes into athletics, it really is the entire community. And so it was this sense of building a team and being in community that I said, you know what? I really want to create something that connects athletes and use that as a vehicle to start spreading the word about mental health, spreading the word about well-being, so that we can start a movement to create a community that's a safe space where we can have these conversations. And lo and behold, given this week, this is needed more than ever. And I think athletes have this special ability to move communities in positive. We've shown that historically. We've shown that we can take leadership role in the civil rights movement. At the same time, athletes, we've shown that we can also bring peace and calm during civil unrest, and so I found that, I'm thinking about Professionals Beyond the Game as this opportunity to really build one team, but starting with athletes to be able to do that.
I love that. And I love your mission statement to further the dialogue, raise awareness, and facilitate access to tangible resources to support the well-being and mental health of former collegiate athletes and elevate their capacity to be successful in life beyond sports. I think that's so important. I think as you and I were just talking, when we came out of our play, came out of college, the connections to what's next was that missing piece. There was not a component that, unless you already had something else lined up, that helped you on that next path. So I believe what you're going to be doing and what you have the potential to do with Professionals Beyond the Game is what you're doing is building that network of resources, of community, of mental health, physical health. You have seven pillars, right?
that we do. Yes.
7 pillars to that program. Let's go through those. What are those pillars there?
So our pillars, our 7 pillars, and for context, again, I'm a certified Gallup strength coach. So doing my research, Gallup has a wellness index. And so it's 5 of these pillars. And what we did in looking at that and through my own personal journey, we added the spiritual pillar and the networking pillar. Mm-hmm. And so for our spiritual, just to go through, our first pillar is the spiritual pillar, which is the deepest values by which you live. Then we have our networking pillar, resources for mutual development, growth, physical health, which is just the conditioning of your body, and mental health. We define that as functioning at a satisfactory level, emotionally and behaviorally. Financial, which is about the knowledge of money and how to use it. And then community, which is just a sense of fellowship with others and the progress through life. And when you talk about the networking piece, we wanted to pull that out of community because it's one thing to have a sense of fellowship, but it's another thing to be able to pick up a phone and connect with a mentor or to connect with someone, and which I've been blessed to be able to do, which is why I'm here in front of you right now, because it got to the point, particularly over the last couple of years, where this journey in terms of career started to progress because I was connecting with my network. And they said, hey, you know what? I got somebody for you to talk to. Yeah. And then talking to that person led to this opportunity. And every opportunity was a learning opportunity. Then it turned into growth and development. And then all of these things, led me to where I am right now. Even when you think about how we met.
Yeah.
It was through a mutual friend, Dr. Kanzer.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, I got somebody for you to meet. And then lo and behold, I meet you and I'm like, whoa, you do bio what? Oh, I got to learn about this.
Yeah.
You bring that me too. And so this has been how, for me, just by tapping into this network and of athletes.
Yes. Yes.
And again, it started by just simply looking at what are the things, and we landed on these 7. What are the things that helps me elevate to that 5th level of my hierarchy of needs?
I love that. And Junotonio, we have about 3 minutes left. Let's talk about that summit that's coming up on June the 20th. And what do people need to know? How do they register? Talk about the summit briefly and how they can reach you as well.
Well, please go to our website, PBTG, or Professionals Beyond the Game, pbtg.org. The Shine Bright Summit is an opportunity to model what we're talking about right now. We're bringing together former collegiate athletes who are now mental health professionals. And like you always say, Tracy, they're shining bright.
Yeah.
And one of the things to where I got connected with you, because I could read your words, but I tell people how to listen with my eyes. And our panelists, including yourself, they model this behavior of how to shine bright. So this is an opportunity to create another safe space so that we can have some real dialogue about how we're moving forward into the year. And like I said, the timing of it is just crazy. The timing of it and how necessary this conversation is, and how we as athletes can go back into the community and model a certain behavior that opens up dialogue and brings people together in a way that is just helpful for everybody.
Absolutely. And that summit starts at 10 o'clock and goes to 12, and they can register on your website, pbtg.org. That is perfect. I am just so thankful for you and your voice and your message and your vision. You continue to shine bright as the leader of your organization. And I'm so thankful as well that we have come in connection and contact, because you're right. One network, one connection after another is what's going to build the bridge and help us do the work that we're all called to do. Is there anything else you want people to know about you? We have about 30 seconds left.
You know what? Create safe spaces for everybody. You see someone looks at like me. I mean, for all of our athletes, regardless of age, if we cheer for them on the court, cheer for them in life.
Oof, that's awesome. Junotonio Pinckney, everybody, Professionals Beyond the Game. We'll see you at the summit. I want my Mental Fitness Matters community to shine bright like the stars that you are. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much, JP.
Anytime. Take care.
You too, buddy.